He was a morbidly obese surgeon destined for an operating table and an early death. Now he's a rebel MD who is fabulously fit and fighting to make America healthy again. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia.
Welcome, folks. This is Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia. We're glad you're here. Our guest today is Aleks Rybchinskiy. We had a little fun with his name when we started. Aleks, welcome to Stay Off My Operating Table.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Phil, why the heck did we invite this guy on the show?
Yeah, this is going to be a great one. Really, two purposes, I guess. Aleks and I first connected because he is a company that's making a meat stick that's a little bit unique, and we'll talk about that. But behind that, Alex's story and what he, kind of has done and thinks about on sort of coaching and mindset and self-improvement is going to be a great part of this conversation as well. With that, why don't maybe we turn it over to Aleks, let him give our audience a little bit of an intro as to who he is, and then we can get into all that good stuff.
Right on. I'm trying to think how far back I should go. I'm a Czech practitioner. I've been in the health and fitness world and for almost 20 years now, working with people from the moment I got in, pretty much got out of personal training school, became a personal trainer. There's too many holes in that. I learned about Paul Chek. That got me into a whole thing and back in 2010 and worked my way up through his system, which less than 100 people have been through, completed all the way through, worked to be an instructor for the Czech Institute. And during that time became a neurosomatic therapist, which is like an osteopathic massage therapist. So realigning craniums and atlases and working on people's organs, things like that. So I've been doing that since 2010 also. And I've been seeing some of the most complicated people. Pretty much anyone that other people don't want to see is usually who comes sees me. And I really enjoy finding out how to help those people who other people, give up on or put aside, or they're too complicated or too much of a liability. So yeah, those are the kind of people that I work with, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's still a lot of fun.
Maybe start, our audience may not be aware of Paul Chek and kind of what the philosophy of, his, I guess it's a school of practice at this point. And like you said, you're trained under him. Talk a little bit about how maybe that differs from standard approaches.
So the beauty of the Czech Institute is I talk about it like an operating system. Like we're sitting on probably Macs or on a Zoom. The Mac has a standard operating procedure for it to function properly. It needs the right RAM, memory, usage, space available, needs the right systems. And once you know how the system operates, then you can add plugins like, oh, I'm going to add in exercise. I'm going to add in this type of food and make sure it's compatible with your operating system. So the Czech Institute gives you a really wide base of what a human needs to be a human before you start adding things, including, like whether someone needs peptides or someone needs creatine or someone needs, some kind of medicine. Do you have the basics in order? Before you go check your alignment on your car, is your tire pressure in the right? Is one of your tires low and that's why it's wobbling? Or we got to make sure that the system is talking to itself properly. And the same thing with the mind. And is the mind talking to the body? Is the body talking to the mind? If your body's sick, and then your mind becomes tired as well. And so you can override it because we're humans. And, I don't know if you guys have kids, I have kids, and when you're tired, baby's crying, you get up and you do it anyway. And so there's overriding mechanisms. And yet at the same time, when all said and done, that caretaker syndrome that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, where someone takes care of their family member for 8 years and they eat absolutely horrifically, and then they don't drink water, don't get sleep, and then after 8 years the person passes or they're done being in their care, then they get sick because their body's okay, now you need rest.
Now you can.
So now you have time to be sick. Exactly. And so the Czech Institute goes into movement, goes into breathing, goes into food, goes into your mind, goes into your emotions, how your interpersonal relationships will impact your own health, and what are the basic foundations of, are you pooping? How are you sleeping? If you're breathing doesn't mean you're breathing properly. What mechanisms are you breathing with? Is it all integrated? Is it integrated with your movements? So there's a lot that goes into the Czech Institute. It's a 4 to 8 year study with them, and a lot of, you have to take what you learn and apply it to people. So I've been doing that for the past 15 years, and then like 3 years of personal training, which was a lot of fun, but still it was like missing that personal training. It was like it was not enough for me. It was like I had questions, couldn't shake someone's hand and go put them under a barbell. I'm like, this person literally got up from a desk being an accountant. I'm like, I can't, it doesn't make sense to go load them up. Like, they've been sedentary. And so I'm like, what else have you been doing today? What is your home life like? Do you have kids? What are you eating? How much are you drinking? When are you going to bed? And I wasn't allowed to ask those questions as a personal trainer. But I needed to. It was like, so then when I found the Czech Institute, I was like, you are supposed to ask those questions. Awesome. And then once I found about Paul Chek, it was like, that was the missing piece that I needed to get permission to ask people questions and had more tools to work with.
We're always interested in kind of origin stories here. So what led you to personal training in the first place?
Funny enough, I died when I was 3. And ever since that
you look
moment,
great for a dead guy.
I did come back. I was dead for 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah. It was necessary clarification.
Okay.
But when they brought me back, people with, it didn't make sense, but people with, you talk to other people with NDEs and like their brains work a little different at that point,
Yeah.
And
NDE is
I
a
was always
near-death
grateful.
experience.
Yes. And I've always been grateful when my eyes open to be alive and breathing, versus some people are like, it's Monday. I'm like, but you're breathing. That's pretty cool. So the questions of more have always been in my mind. So taking that into consideration, I didn't know what I was doing. My parents, I lived at home, and after high school, didn't want to go to college. My parents were like, what is this guy going to do? You can't, like, the European mindset is not kick your kid out and then let him figure it out. It's no, we're going to keep him here until he's knows what he's doing, can stand on his own 2 feet. And so from that moment, they noticed I started working out, and they're like, maybe we should send him to personal training school. And I don't know if I froze. I think I froze.
We hear you, but your image is frozen. So let's pretend that you're just really good at being present and being in the moment.
There we go. I think I'm back.
You're back.
The downside of having a metal roof is I could barely, Wi-Fi. And so they were like, well, what are we going to do with this guy? So they noticed I started working out. I was a bouncer. They were like, maybe we should send him. They sent me to acting school because my mom was like, maybe, he does all these caricatures and he's good at acting. And so they sent me to some acting school, and I didn't like it. It was fun. But then they saw me working out. They started seeing me get bigger. They're like, maybe he's a good personal trainer. And then so I went to personal training school, and that was the easiest thing. It was like the information took no effort to suck into my brain. And I knew it. Like, the moment I saw it, I knew it. And then from that moment on, it was like, all right, this is easy. I get paid for this. Okay. So then I went to work at Lifetime Fitness, and then I met another trainer there, and he challenged my mindset because like I knew all the things. And so he challenged my mindset around, I was probably a little arrogant, and because I knew more than everyone else. So he challenged me, and I was like, where'd you learn all this stuff? So he introduced me to Charles Poliquin or Paul Chek. And Paul Chek, he was like, it goes into spirituality, emotions, mental. I'm like, you know what? I need that stuff. I don't need more supplements and working out. I was already 240 pounds playing semi-professional football. I was an ogre. I was lean. I knew that. But I'm like, I need more of that stuff. So then I bought all of his courses, and it was one of those knowings where you know what you're doing, but you don't know what you're doing yet. And so I went right into that, about all of his entry-level courses. And then from the moment I got my first DVD, put it in, I was like, those are all the questions I had about the abdominal wall that no one's been able to answer. And I always ask questions to people. And like, when they don't answer my question, I always move on to the next person that can give me a straight answer without, giving me a circle or that's it. That's the way it is. I'm always like, no, you can't be, that's the way it is. Like, the only constant is change. Something has to be able to explain this mechanism. And from the moment I put in the first DVD, I was like, I'm going to keep asking this dude questions until it runs out. And I've learned to answer my own questions from yet. And I don't bother Paul. He married us on my property. I met my wife at his course. And that was almost 11 years ago. I met my wife at his course. So it's like, Paul and I are friends. And at this point, my mentor is a friend, also still a mentor. I learned to wear 2 hats. And that's kind of how it got started. I kept asking questions, and I love questions and the mystery of it all.
I want to ask about, just tell us a story or two stories about implementing the check method with a client and why the check method made a difference when other approaches wouldn't.
I have so many. I'll give you an easy one.
I hope so.
Yeah. So an easy one is a person has been going to therapist, to coach, and always had knee pain, and no one could figure it out. And they put him through every exercise, all the bands, all the diet modifications. And I'm looking at him, and I'm working, and he hired me for body work. So I'm working on him. I was like, man, you have no tone in your abdominal wall. And so I'm like, all right. So I'm like, let's get some tone back in your abdominal wall. Let's get your transversus abdominis working again, because that's the corset that pulls your inner unit in attention, that pulls your thoracolumbar fascia in attention, which is that little white fascial diamond on the back of an anatomy chart. And your lats and your glutes connect into it, and it operates that that posterior sling system. And so I got his core engaged, and all of a sudden, boom, knee pain's gone because everything's in tension. A more complex one is I have a client who got his whole colon taken out. It started with like stomach pain, went to the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, and it went from like a biopsy to a resection to a complete resection to a J pouch to a colostomy bag, from a J pouch to a colostomy bag, back to a J pouch. And then they told him, if we do it again, you're going to have a colostomy bag the rest of your life. So then somehow he found me. And so I've never worked with someone that's been, has a J pouch. So I'm like, can you help me? I go, here's what I can help you with. We got to get everything else in order. We have a fungal infection. You don't know how to breathe. Your posture's all messed up. You have so much anesthetic running through you. We have to detox you. So I was like, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you how to breathe. We're going to find out what food works for you, what food doesn't work for you. We're going to teach you how to move. We're going to teach you how to detox. And so as starting implementing these things, he would lose weight, and people, like his mom, would get really upset and like, what are we doing here? He's going to die. I'm like, he's not going to die. He's actually looking better, feeling better. So as we got his body and his fungal infection under control, he can digest food. Now the fungal infection wasn't robbing his food. The metals that were running through his system wasn't affecting his brain anymore. He could think more clearly. We found out his food patterns, like if he ate at a certain time, then he would have to get up in the middle of the night to poop. So then we're like, okay, we have to find new eating rhythms so that way to match your digestive elimination pathways. And I'm like, okay, so then if we poop at this time, that means you could sleep at this time. That means if you eat at this time, that means you could poop at this time and not impact your sleep at this point, which means you can recover. So all of these things, we're trying to figure out how to optimize his sleep, optimize his pooping schedule, optimize his food. And we had to put him on a SCD diet, which is more specific carbohydrate diet, which
I don't know what that
allowed
is.
his gut to heal. So it's a specific carbohydrate diet that basically you can eat. You make your own fermented yogurts and you culture the gut. The problem was he had too much fungus, but he needed bacteria. So it was like I had to look for symptoms of when he was getting overgrowth. Then we would have to then remove his SCD diet and go into more of a carnivore style where he's eating more meat and broths and mineral dense things. So it was like this constant balance of, okay, when do we add it back in? When do we take it out? Okay, his fungal systems are overgrowing. And now we go back and we restabilize his gut by removing all that stuff. And then all simultaneously getting him to move and to breathe and to sleep. And then now he's better. He's working out. He knows when to eat, when to poop, what to eat, when to sleep, how to sleep, like all those things. We darkened his room up. All of those factors we removed so his body can heal more effectively.
That's fascinating to me personally because my dad had had his colon removed when he was 31 years old.
Wow.
And so he lived his whole life with a colostomy bag. And he lived an awful long time for a guy who was in as bad health as he was. But I've never heard of anybody talking about being able to manage that whole mess. That's pretty cool.
He's very motivated.
Yeah.
My dog is screaming at me at the bottom. I'm going to run downstairs, let him in. Okay.
All right. Sorry about that interruption, folks. There, Aleks had to deal with the Chihuahua that lives in his house. You were saying.
You were saying it was hard. You've never met anyone that manages that kind of thing.
Yeah. That was.
And he's very motivated. So he's also now the president of his ileostomy and IBS Crohn's community support group. And a lot of the colon is like when you look at where emotions come from, no one really thinks about where they're processed. They're like, oh, they're this thing that overtakes us or drowns us or it makes us elated, fills our body up. But we don't really think about where they're processed. And the emotions get processed in our organs. I'm sure Dr. Philip can answer when people love, they love where? Where do they feel it? In their hearts. When they break up, their heart aches for somebody. Or when you're anxious, you get butterflies in your stomach. And when you're digesting, your intestines look very similar to your brains. And when your brain receives information, because it's an electromagnetic generator, it doesn't like make thoughts, it downloads thoughts from things. And they get processed and digested in your intestines. So people who don't process their thoughts usually are constipated, or they usually have some kind of digestive issues because they're having a hard time processing the mental thoughts. And each organ will process the physical component, the mental, and the emotional component. And speaking of this person, had a very hard time figuring out their thoughts and how their personality interacts with what their parents taught them. And so that's what we work on mostly, because his body's fine. He knows how to take care of himself. He knows how to move and sleep and poop and breathe and all these things. And so most of the time is now we're figuring out these thoughts that he can't digest anymore, because that's what his colon did and helped him do.
The whole discussion, on the gut brain axis, right? And we continue to unravel these relationships, gut to brain, heart to brain, gut to heart, and they are all connected, right? And some of these connections are like the physical, connections that we can see, right? The nerve roots running back and forth, the nerve pathways running back and forth. But, I think there's more to it, right? And that's the type of things I know that Paul Chek, talks about and others. And it's fascinating stuff, right? Sometimes a lot of the mainstream tends to dismiss it, as the woo type of stuff because we can't measure it or can't see it on a scan. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening and it's not, relevant and real.
Yeah, I've heard Paul say one time, am I frozen again? Or can you
No,
guys
you're
hear me?
good.
Oh, you're good.
There we go. I heard Paul say, prove to me how much you love your partner or your dog or your child. No, show me, prove it to me. Can you weigh it? Can you measure it? But no, we all agree that love exists, but no one can actually prove how much they love somebody. And so at least we can start there and work our way backwards is a great first step. It's something that we all agree on is love.
I did talk a little bit more maybe about this. I guess I'm going to say this sort of relationship, this transition, that you've undergone, physical therapy, right? Personal trainer, that type of stuff, and into this type of work, right? And it sounds like you bring the two together. And maybe just, give us a little bit more about your perspective of how they are complementary and they are, working together.
Like they say, like your hairstylist is like your therapist, your personal trainer sometimes is your therapist. And so when people are moving, they're also having somatic experiences where their emotions are stuck in muscles. And I don't know if you guys ever had the experience of getting manual therapy done on yourself and then remembering a memory or having a thought or having an emotional reaction, and you're like, what is this? And so we will have emotions trapped in different tissues. And so as people move their bodies, they're also pushing that out of the tissues. And I've always had people tell me this thing where it's, I don't know why I told you that. And I've learned that people say that around safe people who can hold what you say with empathy and respect and trust. And it's an unconscious behavior where someone like, hey, you feel safe to talk to. And I don't know why I shared all that. Did I overshare? And then they're asking for permission. Is it okay that, I overshared? And so, no, I've heard so many things at this point that nothing's going to scare me. And so when you're working with people and they're telling you about, oh, I had a hard day with my wife today and work sucked. And then my brain picks up on these little data points. And so I'm thinking, I'm like, why is this guy talking about his relationship? Interesting. Let him talk. And then as he talks and as we work, and then he's like, oh man, I feel better. So then I started wondering, where's the separation between the two? And that's along the times where I met Paul Chek. And that's like in the holistic lifestyle coaching level 1, I had debilitating back pain. That I never had back pain, but I was in a relationship with a woman that I'm pretty sure she was an alcoholic. And I was living with her, and I was carrying this whole relationship on my back. I couldn't take care of myself. I was out of shape. I was a personal trainer. I was getting overweight because of the food that she was feeding me. I was trying to take care of myself, but then I was getting shamed and criticized for cooking for myself, as if she wasn't good enough to take care of me. And I'm like, but look at me. Like, I'm trying to tell her, look at what it's doing to me. Like, I need to change something. And so when I went into holistic lifestyle coaching level 1, I had an instructor that I'm like, hey, every time I walk away from you, I don't have back pain. Every time I get close to you, I have back pain. What do you think that is? And then so he starts asking me questions about my relationships and how everything's all, tied. And he's asking me questions about my relationship. And then all of a sudden he goes, I think you know the answer to your own question. And the first thought that popped up was, I need to break up with this woman. And right when I thought that, my back pain disappeared. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is odd. And it makes sense. So then within 3 months, I broke up with her. And then my life started to improve and I didn't have back pain. And it was quite interesting. And the same thing with like your knees is usually a bowing to an elder. So if your knees start hurting, I would go and disrespect my father. I'm like, I know better. And I'd walk away and my knee started to hurt. And it was on my right side. The right side is responsible for your masculine energy and your left side is responsible for the feminine energy. So I noticed my right knee started to hurt. And then I asked myself, if I go apologize to my father right now for my behavior, is this the problem? Is this the cause of my knee pain? And all of a sudden my knee pain went away. And then I started to cry because I realized that I was being disrespectful to my father and all these emotions came up and I was being, egotistical and petty. And so then I was like, walked up, I'm sobbing. Now he's sobbing. It's all right, it's fine. And it was these moments over and over again that I realized that, when people come in, I start asking them about any specific things without directly pointing it out. Because if I, point to something very personal, the immediate reaction is to completely reject it and be defensive. And so sometimes I'll start talking about myself. Like, oh man, I'm having this knee pain. I'm not really, being respectful. I don't have, I wouldn't have knee pain, but I'm, hadn't gotten a fight with my wife and, and I wasn't really being respectful to her. And now my knee hurts. And then they'll go, oh yeah, I got no fight with my wife too. And I'm saying, but if you go, hey, have you been fighting with your wife and being egotistical about it and then shutting her out and dismissing her? No, I don't do that. So it's like it's a fun art, because I used to be like that. I'm like, oh, you're being disrespectful to your wife. No, I'm not. Now we're getting nowhere. So questions come out a lot. I'm trying to answer your question because it's always been this question, this looming observation that I've had that over the years, I got more masterful or artful with bridging the two. But it's something like you were saying, you can't touch it, you can't weigh it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, but you could feel it. And the more you get close to how you're feeling and honest how you're feeling, the easier it is to sense how other people are feeling. Because if you're good, let's say if you're confident in yourself and someone tries to bring your confidence down, I'm like, I'm confident in this. And I'm like, I immediately go, this person's not confident. So then with that realization, instead of making them feel bad, I start questioning why they're not confident. So now it turns it kind of back on them. And now I'm more curious. And it might be part of my personality to go there, but that's kind of how I've been almost my whole life. But now I have more tools to work with and more time and experience and people. But what I found is I can't go back to being a personal trainer ever. Is I never ask these questions because people will never get better. And if no one even asks, people get blown away when I measure their pelvis and they're like, no one's ever measured my pelvic angles before on the orthopedic angles. And I'm like, well, that makes sense why you have back pain, because your pelvis is so retroverted that your whole spine is in flexion and you don't have stability. And yeah, that's why you blew a disc. And let's put the pelvis back and let's get your spine back in order. And they're like, no one's ever measured me before. I'm like, that makes me sad and blows me away. But also I know how the industry is. And, I charge a lot of money and you have to be very confident for someone to pay you a lot of money to go, hey, we're going to go breathe on the floor for an hour today. And they're going to, what? Trust me. Let's go breathe for an hour. Let's fix this breathing issue, and then we'll move forward. So I can see how someone could be very intimidated by telling someone who's, no, I want to lose 20 pounds. I'm like, no, you need to get your mind in order. You need to get your values in order. You need to stop drinking beer every night and stop being inflamed and go to bed on time. And then maybe your pain will go away. These are the kind of things that are, you don't tell people about. And I can see how they'd be scared.
Oh my gosh, he has the gigantic water bottle.
Yeah, it actually looks like gasoline jug, but
It does.
definitely a good one.
I'm a cliche.
I would say that fits very well within a theme, that we see among our guests on this podcast of the curiosity, the not just willing to accept the sort of dogma, right? And a lot of ways, I see this in medicine, and you're talking about it, in the training world, where, dogma is a crutch. You want to say, we know the answer and this has to be the answer and we can't question the answer. And, we're the best ones. We kind of hold the key, right? So you got to trust us and you got to keep coming to us and you're dependent on us. And in the meantime, behind the scenes, the reality is that they really have never even thought well about the problem, right? They just jumped right to, this is the answer. So as long as I just keep repeating that answer, I'm going to be fine. And I think it's a theme that we see over and over again on the people that come to this podcast. And, obviously, most of our guests don't know each other, but yet that comes out, on a repeated basis, which is pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, I commend you for being a medical professional and talking to people like myself. I rag on the medical industry as much as I rag on the holistic industry. And I'm like, how do you call yourself holistic and all you're giving them is supplements? How are you saying that you're going to solve their problem with a pill? Like, no one's asking each other questions. And like, how are you going to sing this person back into health? You're not going to teach them how to eat. Or you're going to keep telling them to eat McDonald's while you're going to play a tuning fork on them. That's going to fix their problem. I rag on, it doesn't make sense to me, what I'm saying is I commend y'all for being open-minded and like seeing, it's kind of like we're in a very similar field, but opposites, where it's like by the time someone gets to you, they're pretty bad. They're in bad shape, and by the time someone gets to me, they're in pretty bad shape. Very few smart people come to me and go, can we do some maintenance and make sure I don't get in a bad shape? Because you don't really feel it. But by the time someone comes to you, they're probably on a stretcher, wheeled in, full of hoses and things like that, and tubes, and you're like, all right, I gotta work, and yeah, I wish it wasn't that way. And hopefully we can all have some maintenance things for ourselves that we could, like you're saying, is not be another patient.
It strikes me as I'm listening to you that I make points in a roundabout fashion. I'm aware of that. So hang on. I think back to the early followers of Jesus, and they didn't call themselves Christians. They just called themselves the way, and what it was, the way to live. And you go back and you read, you get one of those red letter Bibles and you read just the red letters that were Jesus' words. You read just what Jesus said. And basically, the message was, don't be a dick. I realize that's not officially, there's no denomination that teaches that, but hey, love each other and forgive each other. And this is the way to live. And what the effect of that is being whole and healthy in your mind, in your heart, in your emotions, in your soul. And we know after 2,000 years of various kinds of exploration that having that kind of approach to yourself and to other people is good for the health of your body as well. And it seems like the more we dig down into root causes, the more we get to things that they're not mechanical. They're not material. It's like the mechanical or the material is downstream of whatever's going on in the mind. I'm not sure I've got the right word.
Soul?
In the soul. And it's fascinating that, in another age, somebody talking like you are would probably be considered a priest or a shaman or possibly a sorcerer who had to be burned at the stake. And yet
Probably.
and yet the end goal is actually just is health, well-being, not just a well-functioning body, but a well-functioning mind and emotions and relationships. I don't even think I've got a question. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Bob Marley talks about that. He says, are you a rich man? It's financially? Am I rich with love? Am I rich with friendship? Am I rich with like joy? Yeah. Yeah, I'm a rich man, but financially he gave all that up. But it's like, what is rich? Yeah. Yeah.
You're the first guest who's ever quoted Bob Marley on this show.
We love it. We love it. Maybe that's opportunity to take the hard pivot here and how'd you get into making meat sticks, and talk about, what led you to that, because that's a pretty interesting, I would say, dimension to add to all of this.
Been since meeting Paul Czech, since I was a fat kid growing up, and my parents always cooked, but then I'd go to school and eat whatever garbage, all the school lunches. And, I was that, are you going to eat that, kid? Are you going to finish that? No? Okay, I'll finish that. And so then I found out, freshman year that I went from, 189 pounds to 140 pounds, started playing football. I'm like, man, exercise really changed my body. And interesting. So then by the time I was in senior in high school, I weighed the same as I did in 8th grade. And I was but more muscular. Then I haven't ever been lean since I moved from Ukraine here when I was 4.5. So I saw pictures, I was a little rail thin. And, I'm like, man, I wonder if I'm do one of these bodybuilders and eat chicken and rice and salad. I wonder if I'll lean up. And then I'm like, let me try that. So then 6 months goes by and I'm like shredded and big. And I'm like, okay, so food makes a difference. So then preaching food, learning about Paul Czech and preaching the food. And then I was like, wait, I got to eat the right kind of food. So then I've been preaching about, grass-fed, finished, and pasture-raised meats. So to make sure it's not only grass-fed, because you can have grass-fed is one of those catch-all statements, the greenwashing statements, because all cows are grass-fed.
Organic or
exactly.
Non-GMO.
Yeah. And so grass-fed and grass-finished, you can still feed lot. So then I'm like, all right, so you got to grass-fed, grass-finished, and have it pasture-raised, which means it's cows outside. So I've been talking about that for a very long time, and to clients, sometimes on the internet, and now I have fast forward, now I have kids and I'm watching them eat, and then I'm watching them eat, but I'm also working a lot more, and I'm in my gym, which my house is 200 feet into that direction. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, my blood sugar's off. And when my blood sugar's off, I get really cranky and I come home and then I start getting snappy. And my wife's like, don't do that. She's like, you need to eat. But I'm like, I don't want to ruin my dinner. She's like, you need snacks. So then I started, one of my friends introduced me to eating raw liver and showed me how without contaminating and stuff like that. So I started eating liver raw, and then at heart, and then testicles raw. If you want a testosterone boost, let me tell you, raw testicles, they'll make you feel alive again.
Rocky Mountain oysters, do you call them that around where you live?
You do, but I think Rocky Mountain oysters are cooked, and I could be wrong. I don't know. I think they're fried, and so.
Okay.
But if you, But yes, Rocky Mountain oysters, if you eat them raw, they're very intense and powerful. And they taste like chicken, like raw chicken. So if you're not fond of that taste, maybe some seasoning. But then since I'm always busy, I always lose track of where my meat is, and it goes bad. And so then I got a dehydrator, started dehydrating all this stuff. So then one of my clients, Luke Story, came in, who's also a podcaster. And he was had some blood sugar issues. And so he's like, do you have any orange juice or anything like that? I'm like, I don't have any of that. So I'm like, but I do have this and tons of B vitamins and choline and zinc and it'll pep you up. So he ate it and he's like, this liver? He goes, I'm like, yeah, and I can actually stomach this. Normally everyone that makes liver is disgusting. How'd you make this? I'm like, oh, I dehydrated it. He's you need to make a business out of it. So then 6 months later, I'm kicking the can down the road, Googling how to start a jerky business. And then I'm like, I'm still eating dehydrated liver, So then my business partner now, who is my friend who owns, Eleco, all the weightlifting company, this company up here, they make all these stands and racks and all this stuff. They're usually the weights in the Olympics for the Olympic weightlifting. So he became a friend of mine, and I want to make a protein bar and something that's your caliber that you would eat, you'd share with your family. I'm like, there's no protein bars that I would eat. They're all made by one big company. All this stuff is dehydrated and processed in one company, and everyone makes their own processing off of that thing. And I was like, let me think about it. So then I gave him some liver, and this has a lot of protein. I'm like, it has a lot of protein. And it's nutrient dense. I'm like, it's probably the most nutrient dense thing on the planet. And he was like, if we can make this taste better, then we're onto something. So then we started formulating and like mixing in meat and then heart and then liver. And then we ended up with, the Bursky stick finally, after 3 years of like idea to this and many different renditions of finding manufacturers was a nightmare because everyone wanted to use the Wisconsin method of cooking, which is like, 170 degrees to a certain temperature. And I was like, but enzymes denature past 160 degrees. So that means it's not as easily digestible. And the USDA says we can cook it as low as 120 degrees, I think 115 or 135 degrees. So I'm like, why are we not following the USDA protocols? That's what they're saying. And then they're like, it's going to take longer to cook. But finally, we played ball. I found one that would play ball. And then I started looking into what citric acid is. I'm like, man, that's derived from black mold. They put black mold on sugar. I'm like, why do I want to put that in my food? And so then I'm like, okay, what about this lactic acid stuff? I'm like, that comes from Streptococcus thermis. And I'm like, okay, so they put strep bacteria on sugar. Okay. I'm like, I don't want that. So then I had that same guy was like, I'll play ball. We'll put some celery in there. How's celery? It naturally occurring nitrates. They're already, and I'm like, okay, they're already bound to salt. So I have to formulate all this. And it took some time. So I'm like, sea salt, meat. And then I even found out how they make a collagen casing, which they take cow hides and they put acid or like an alkaline solution to separate the collagen from the flesh. And then they skim it off and form it into a tube. And I'm like, I don't like that either. Let's keep the theme organs and let's put it into a non-dyed organ casing and let's keep it on brand. And that's kind of how it came up. But it started with my client coming in and having some blood sugar issues. And it like lit his eyes up. And then he got me thinking about it. And then I watching my daughter take like pepperonis and stuff to school because she eats protein too. My wife not getting enough protein. And so she won't eat the liver like I will. So I made this for everyone that doesn't get nutrition in, all the women that are trying to get protein in, the post-pregnancy, during pregnancy, not getting enough folate, because we know folic acid is a synthetic derivative of folate. So if you see folic acid, it's folate, but made in the lab. So I'm like, okay, we need folate, tons of B vitamins, copper, vitamin A, selenium, choline, zinc. It's all in the liver and heart, CoQ10, and like, it's all great for the heart. Why are we eating this stuff? And then we have this mindset that it's gross. I even have people try it and they say, I don't know, I don't eat liver. And I'm like, this is good. I'm like, so you eat liver? I guess I do, So that's kind of how it started, this smorgasbord of like people and like experiences. And I'm like, let's see what happens. And then someone played ball and we found good quality meat from the Savory Institute, a regenerative meat source. And we found a manufacturer and we found our packaging and we're like, all right, we're doing this. Okay. And then they came back and they were phenomenal. They taste great. So then we started giving them out to people and they're like, this is great. I'm like, there's liver in here? And they're like, no idea. And, or they'll say something like, I knew there was an aftertaste, but that's kind of how it all got started.
Awesome. I've loved the idea of liver for a long time, but every time I do it, it's the texture that gets to me.
I need to send you some.
Yes, you do. Yes. Aleks needs to send me some liver.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate that Aleks did send me some, and they're great, they're convenient, and we're pretty selective, right? Because there are a lot of products like this out there, and quite frankly, I get approached by most of them to try my thing, and can I come on your podcast, and this and that, and we're pretty selective, and I really will only do that for the ones that I like, and that I think are clean and do fill this need like you were talking about of ideally you eat your 2 maybe 3 meals a day, high protein, and you get your grass fed and grass finished and pasture raised meats and all of that. But the reality is we all live our life, right? And we travel and have kids and we're busy. And sometimes, you just want to grab something, to have and as, a snack, we'll call it. But these really can be a meal. They're pretty nutrient dense and they're pretty satisfying. And so I loved what you do. I loved what you made. And then I found out more about your background and everything like we've been talking about. And it all comes together well. Happy to talk about it and promote it a little bit and let people know that this option is out there. Ultimately, the way I look at, what I talk about primarily, which is eating whole real food. We have to make that practical and feasible for people. And I think this is a great option for doing that. You already sort of touched on some of the maybe, surprises that come up in the when you're trying to do this, right? And in the food industry. And I'm always fascinated hearing about this because as I think, why don't we have more, stuff like this out there? We have a lot of stuff that's called food that's just absolute garbage. And it seems to be very hard to get real food, kind of into the market. So maybe talk a little bit about some of those other challenges. You were the first person I heard describing the additives like the citric acid and the lactic acids in that way. And if people knew where they actually come from, you're right. They wouldn't want them and they wouldn't eat them, but they don't know where it comes from. And it's, citric acid, they squeeze some oranges and, that can be healthy for me. So maybe, what are some of the other sort of surprises or roadblocks that you had to figure out to get something like this to market?
It's usually the manufacturers because, I can't scale this out of my house. We're talking about, thousands and thousands of pounds of meat being processed, and it has to be done in a USDA facility and checked. And people who manufacture these have done it even down to the farmers. It's the way we've done it, and it's the way we could sell it. And it's most of the time that they're afraid to switch because they won't sell their product. And most farmers are living maybe like one herd away from bankruptcy. So if they're if their cows go down or they're underweight and they're undersized and no one buys their meat, then that's their farm, and they could be like a fourth generation farmer. And that's scary. That's very scary. And so everyone's kind of doing the best that they can. And I have no hard feelings for those farmers because I know I've talked to so many trying to find sourcing. And so all our meat is supported with affidavit claims, meaning the farmer legally gives me their affidavit that says these cows have never been fed grains and these cows have never been inside more than 60 days, which is what we know as grass-fed, grass-finished, which is never fed grains. So our cows have never had grains in their whole life. And if they are, they're removed from that herd. And if they're inside more than 60 days, whether there's a storm or they get hurt and they need to rehab, if they're inside more than 60 days, they go to the grass-fed, grass-finished, they get removed from the pasture-raised lot. And it takes, it's much more expensive meat, and I don't argue with my farmers on the price. I'm like, it is what it is. What do you guys need to function and survive, and not only survive but thrive? Okay, then that's why our sticks are like, they're not even that much more. They're like $1 more than a regular price sticks. But everyone's kind of racing to the bottom, and that's why it gets a little tough because you're playing this margin game and you have to really buy so much. And so I don't want to play that game. I'm like, I have a really good quality thing that really is helping people. We had our first unsolicited feedback from somebody who their anemia got reversed, and all they did was eat two of our sticks a day for 2 months, and then they went and got their blood work and they don't have anemia anymore. I can't say we get rid of anemia, but someone came back and said, after eating your sticks, now it's gone. So pretty cool. We had another person come back and heal their psoriasis, and all they did was cut out every other starch and food that they had, and they ate 3 of the big Burskies plus like sweet potatoes and some other good whole foods, more on the carnivore side, and some starches, and their skin completely got better. I'll send you some pictures because that cool. person is flaking off, and then all of a sudden everything's got better. But a lot of it is playing hardball. Everyone's been doing it the same way they do it. Everything is a time game. Everything is a market game. Everything is a, pay me up front game. And it's hard to break through and have the patience to work with some of these guys and, pay them a little bit extra for their work and figure out solutions and how to solve this problem. And during this whole process, I realized why people don't do it. It's because it's incredibly difficult. And incredibly painstaking, and no one responds to you on time. And I'm like, what is happening? Everything takes a week or a month to get a response and action. And my brain doesn't work that way. I'm like, I already fixed it yesterday. Let's go, guys. Everyone, come on, shape up. Let's go. But it does take time and for them to make it. And those other additives that we were asking about, I can send you a link to the USDA where what they allow under the word spices alone is staggering. I would it would take me probably 20 minutes to read it all. And it goes from anything like herbs to literal chemical formulations that have no distinct, they have a definition to them. So it is much easier for me. You could throw out some of the fun ones. You could put like a small spectrum of, I think, MSG into there, and without it being listed. But if you really want to know like how deep it runs, and that's what they've even told us, hey, we can put this under there. We can throw it under spices. And I'm like,
Oh,
people who know me will eat me alive. They will never allow that. I've lived my whole life in integrity, and what I mean, what I say, and I say what I mean. And I, out of good conscience, couldn't even even if I knew what was in there, people would guess and start to formulate. So I'm like, no, they have to be literally spelled out, and everything that's not spelled out does not belong in there.
that answers a question that I have had for a while. There's actually a beef stick that I have a couple of bags on my top of my fridge right now. That's what I grab late in the afternoon when I'm getting the munchies. Super savory, seems like it's probably pretty good, has a very small list of ingredients, all of which I like, but there is a line in there that says spices. And I read that and I thought, what does that mean? Is that salt and pepper? Is that garlic? What is that? It was just so generic. It just felt a legal loophole. That's what yeah, it felt like a legal loophole.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is exactly what it is, you know. And when you see things like spices or natural flavor is
Oh,
another one
that's,
that
yeah,
you'll see,
natural flavor.
right? And
Ugh.
there's nothing natural about those flavors. But that's the unfortunate reality of our food supplies. You know, when you find things that don't play those games, that's generally going to be better options for you. Like I said, you know, I've been fortunate to try them, and, you know, full disclosure, you sent them to me for free, but I love them, and you're not paying me to say that beyond a free box or so. And like I said, I think people will find them useful. How did I get them?
Eatbursky.com, around all platforms from YouTube to Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. It's all Eat Bursky at Eat Bursky. And then it'll all take you back to our website at eatbursky.com.
Yeah, and so Bursky is Berski. Where does Bursky come from?
So fun little story. We used to be called the Better Jerky. And so I looked into it. There's another Better Jerky company, but they're a different name. So I made ours 25% different, which I guess skips that view of the trademarks, meaning you could trade, like there's a guy that made Starbucks, and then also there's Starbucks, and then there's not Starbucks. Because it's different, it's technically could register as a different trademark. So as long as everything's 25% different. So when we applied for our trademark, they challenged our trademark. This is like a year ago when we were, we're like putting our own money into this, and we're like, do we get lawyers or do we switch it all together and make something up? And so we're like, you know what? Forget it. We haven't made a printing run. We were about to make a huge printing run and put that everywhere. And we're like, you know what? Let's change it. So we played around for a week with 8 days. That was our work week, 8 days, 8 hours a day for about a week. And then our CMO was Ricard Blomberg, Berg, and then Ribchinskiy, what about Bergsky? And then we're like, ugh. And then we dropped the last letters and we got Bursky. And then we're like, and so we sat with Bursky. We're like, let's wear this for about a week. And so we're like, Bursky, hey, grab me a Bursky. Are we out of Burskys? Do we need to order more Burskys? Hey, can you throw me a Bursky? And then so after about a week, it's stuck. And then we started telling people about it, and they're like, oh, Bursky, I like that name. Rolls off your tongue. And so that's kind of how Bursky is. Ricard's name, which is my business partner, and my last name, and we smushed them together. And we're like, let's make up a word that no one can challenge. You can't challenge something that we made up.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it sounds like it could be like a Ukrainian word for something, meat related, but
Yeah.
it's awesome that it's not. Very good. So Eat Bursky, and where can people connect with you outside of that?
If people want to coach with me personally, they can go to primalfusionhealth.com, or on Instagram, I'm at health.performance.engineer. And then they can reach out. I respond to my DMs and they have questions. And we also have a community called Bodhi Building Institute, where not only do you build your physical body, but you also build your Bodhi, which is your spiritual body as well, and integrate those two together, where instead of paying us one-on-one a coach, it's a community style where people can come in and we answer their questions and coach them live. And there's coaches in there that we do case study analysis with and help them train their clients. And there's people that come in and ask about their relationship stuff, and people come in and their health problems, and everyone learns in the community. So everyone's learning from everybody. And it's a really awesome culture of people who are non-judgmental and are here to learn something. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. And keeping open mind, keeping it discerned, because there's a lot of discernment that needs to occur nowadays. So those are the, I guess, 3 places people can find
What was
me.
it? What was that? Bodhi?
Bodhi Building Institute, BODHI Building Institute.
All right, very good. We'll make sure all that stuff shows up in the show notes. You can get a hold of Aleks at health.performance.engineer on Instagram. He says he goes back to his DMs. The website is eatbursky.com. And that's easy to remember. Congratulations. Very well done. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to have you back and go into even weirder, more woo stuff. This looks fun.
I'm all here for it. I'm here for it.
All right. This has been Stay Off My Operating Table with Dr. Philip Ovadia. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to y'all next time.
Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.